Because they know you.
We actually, yeah, we do. We do have a bleep. We got a bleep button right here.
It's like, we're live 5 seconds later. All right, now we're live.
Now we're live.
Now we're really live.
All right.
Is it me?
Yeah, kick it off.
All right. So everyone, welcome back to Brandbeats. My name is Eric.
My name is Andrew.
I'm Lindsay.
As JoJo.
I am Jody.
Nice.
That was almost smooth. We almost did that smooth.
That was pretty good. That was the best one so far, I think.
That it literally has.
And we're also missing Erwin, conveniently, so he'll be here sometime. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't know.
Was he showing up?
He'll keep us on our toes. So I think today we just want to talk about the importance of voting. We just announced that Basic is sort of under this new initiative called Time to Vote, where we're all getting the day off on Election Day, November 3rd, which is fucking important. So please, please, please go vote. You know, our future's on the ballot. So that said, I mean, a lot has happened these past few weeks with the debates and everything. So I think we just kind of want to chop it up about like the electoral process and all that entails in this great nation. So if anyone wants to take a stab at talking about some of this stuff, please.
Did you say oh my God, go ahead, Lindsay.
I have a question to pose to you guys. I've been able to vote. I think we've all been able to vote for a while now, but I've never necessarily taken the initiative to like research like what my vote means. I've just voted because I know it's a right. And as
good question,
a woman and as a Black woman, like my ancestors and my people fought for the right for me to vote. So I just did it out of habit. But this election, I have taken a lot of time to like research what my vote means, what I'm voting for, how it's going to impact everything. My bad, guys, it's me. I've been watching the documentaries Explained, that's on Netflix right now, that did a beautiful job painting about like what people's vote means. So like, have you guys really started to, with this election, educate yourself on voting and like what it means for you?
Conceptually, like, sorry, when you mean like educating myself on what I should be voting for, or just like what it means to vote and like what just conceptually?
What it means to vote and like how your vote you feel could impact, you know, this election, no matter how big or how small the weight may be, how you feel like your impact is going to make a difference.
I mean, I would say like I personally haven't educated myself with like the grander picture of like what it means to vote. Like I haven't put thought into it. I've definitely decided I want to have a different relationship with voting this year. In just a sense of like, I think that like I've done research and things and all of that, but I want to kind of go deeper. But anyways, I want to stick on to your point. Like, I think it's really interesting. Like, it's a really interesting big idea. And I don't know if anybody else has thought of it, but I'm kind of curious because I haven't done this, like maybe what revelations you had in reading into some of these things or thinking about this.
You said same.
Did you just ask the same question Lindsay asked?
Yeah.
No, I was posing it back to Lindsay. Yeah, because I was just saying that I haven't done it. So like I haven't had any sort of like revelations around it.
Yeah. I still go very back and forth, specifically because of my location. So in watching that documentary Explained, every vote matters and like everybody should get out and vote, but they said something that really hit home. Like, you know, when we're in big states like this, like California, they said that our vote matters about just as much as somebody voting in Wyoming. Like an individual vote is not going to do much to sway the state. So, you know, that point was just like, well, why am I voting then? Like if I'm in California, like why am I going to vote? But then I thought deeper about it. And again, like I thought, you know, Black people did not have the right to vote. And then beyond that, women did not have the right to vote. So it is a duty of mine and an obligation of mine, because people fought for my rights to be able to do this. Like I have to vote, even though I don't like either option, you know, I still feel like I need to get out there and cast my vote and make an example for people who really don't feel like it's a big deal or their vote's not going to matter. Like, I took it in as like, well, what is the impact for me personally, not just based on who I'm voting for, but like, why am I voting? And again, it goes back to like history for me. The location makes it a very hard thing for me to feel like, is this even going to matter?
Yeah, I totally understand that perspective, and to a large extent agree with the actual like impact of my vote on a federal level. But I see almost like an inverted relationship between like the larger the office, the less my vote matters. The smaller the office, the more it matters. So if we think local, state, federal, I feel like your individual vote actually has the potential to have quite a bit of impact, right? Mostly because we don't have an electoral college in our towns or our cities. Bookmark electoral college rant later. But I do think then the feeling of just, I'm doing this for me, for my own reasons, for my own satisfaction, is greater on the federal level, where I feel like it's, particularly this election and the last one, felt so incredibly high stakes, even though I knew my vote technically didn't count for much. It mattered a great deal for me to show up and like symbolically show up. But I think the down ballot is so much, well, at least as important, if not more so. So it's really critical to show up for that.
I'm curious if like everyone's had time to like dive into voting guides and things like that, or like, I know there's some great sites and resources. I think Ballot Ready is a good one, Vote for 11. So I'm curious like if y'all have your own like resources and tools you use as you get ready for the election.
Like I said, that is one thing I have started to do. I've been like changing the relationship I've had with it. Like it was funny. Like I went online and I was like, hey, I don't actually know any platforms. It was interesting. Like I was like, I don't know any platforms that make it easy for me like out of the gate. Like I almost had no resources. I went to like the government website to find like the Ballot Ready and like read their paperwork. And then I was like actually just reading through the summaries and okay, who supports this, who doesn't, and then I was starting Googling people's names, and I was doing a very manual process of this. That I was like, I kind of just want to see what this process is like for, I don't know, maybe just for the average person who's not tech savvy, who doesn't get links dropped to them all the time. And it takes a lot of work to educate yourself at the end of the day, especially like, it's nice that there are, you know, Ballot Ready, like that there are resources for that. But I think like the popularization and like the spreading of that information is like incredibly important for people, because so many people also will go in and they just like, I don't know this, so I'm not going to fill out this part of the ballot. And that's problematic at the end of the day. Because I have, like, much like you were saying, Lindsay, like, I think there's been times in my past to tie it back to your point earlier, where it's like, I felt a little apathetic about my vote. Especially my vote in California. And like, I think this is like a broader problem people have with voting in general in because of the electoral college, because of gerrymandering, because whatever, right? Like there's a lot of people feel like, what's the point when, what's the point when it's not going to matter in the end result the other day? And I love that you said like, there's a personal relief that comes from just being a part of that process, because at the end of the day, it should be about you feeling like you had a voice in it, whether or not it goes your way, regardless of where you are. And I think like the biggest problem I had, like when I used to like look back at myself and like be like this apathetic perspective I had on voting on some of the things. Like I've always voted, but I definitely didn't always vote on all of like the ballot measures and things like that. And I used to be like, well, I didn't educate myself. So like one, I had a problem with that. Like I wouldn't vote on it because I didn't know. But at the end of the day, it's like, I want to be educated on the conversations that are happening specifically at the local level, like you're saying too, Jody. Like at the end of the day, like that's the stuff that does affect your day-to-day more than a lot of the stuff at the national level that you're voting on. But I think the biggest like problem I have is like I have like a self-guilt now where if I feel like if I didn't vote on something, I have no right to sort of speak on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and like that's my motivation is like if I don't vote, I feel like, and this is like I would never judge this on anybody else. I just feel like I have shaky ground standing on when I have an opinion on it. And so like that's a big thing for me is like it gives me a right to be like, didn't support that, think it's wrong, even though that's the way that it is. Here's why. And you know, have like a thought process behind it.
I think it's super important to have your own thought process behind it, because take that like a step further, like when you're reading everything on like on all these propositions, because I mean like commercials are thrown at you left and right. You're like vote yes, vote no. I'm like, why am I voting yes or no?
Yeah.
I found it interesting in the last election. I had a couple of my girlfriends, you know, kind of ask me which way I was voting, and I kind of hold that like, you know, to myself, because I just feel like voting is very personal. But they were shocked when I said, you know, Kirk and I vote, we do our ballot separately. Like we both sit at the table, you know, if we're going in, but like he votes the way he wants to vote, I vote the way I want to vote. Like we don't just sit there and like copy each other's ballots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a couple of my girlfriends were like, oh yeah, I just take whatever my husband does and I copy his. I'm like, ugh, no, like, no. Like, even if you don't know what you're voting for, like take the time to just like research as quickly as you can, like what you're voting for. Like, don't just like take someone else's ballot, like your spouse's or significant other's ballot, and just like copy it. It just hurt my heart so bad.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that familial connection is something that's pretty prominent. Like as kids, you know, we identify the way our parents lean usually. And I feel like that's probably part of it, right? Is like, I have no context for this. I trust this person. I'll vote the way they vote, you know? But yeah. I think this year it's like, you can't fucking do that. Like you got to do your research. You got to put in the work and like look stuff up and then really come to your own decisions. Because the resources are out there, and like, it is easy to be apathetic to Andrew's point, but I don't know. I just feel like we should mobilize everyone, and especially young people who are historically, you know, the lowest percentage group to go vote. Like, yeah, I'm just kind of concerned. Like, how can we get people that are in our generation to get out to the polls, you know?
Oops, sorry.
Well, if this far is any indication, like it's a historic turnout, right? Like the amount of people who have voted early thus far, and I don't know if that's because of the pandemic, there is a big turnout. And I think so much of the civil unrest that we've seen, obviously, over the last 6 months, so much of, I mean, whatever, you know, everything we've seen is probably motivating people to do something. And idle hands, right? I mean, people are like kind of bored, probably actually a little bit more engaged in everything that they get time to do it now too, which is like, that's the biggest thing for me. And I talked to Jody about this a lot. Like, I love like the initiatives that are going on right now where, you know, places of business are really trying to make time for people to vote, it's so important. You know, this is something that takes place on a Tuesday, and like for so many people that work service industry jobs, of course, you're talking about lower socioeconomic individuals that don't have, of course, as usual, like don't have access to, or they don't have the means to vote or the ability to take a vacation day to go vote, or can afford to do it. And it's really great to see all the initiatives around, hey, let's make sure we make time for people to vote. Just that is like so incredibly important, I think. And I hope that if you can find a way to not go to work on that day, don't go to work on that day so that you can go out and vote.
Man, if it's one of many like tips of the iceberg, right? To just like coldly examine why our election is on a Tuesday, and it's not at that there is like willful and like systemic endeavors to limit polling stations in specific like demographic areas. And so one of the things I sincerely hope begins to be a broader conversation and citizens start to demand is that this becomes a national holiday, that there is free transportation, right? I mean, just mail-in voting. I'm excited. I'm very dismayed at how it is being at the attempt to undermine it. But my sincere hope is that just becomes the norm across the country. Like in Oregon, we've been voting by mail for, I don't know, decades. And, going back to one of the original second question, I think was when I get my robust like voting pamphlet, I take a weekend day and I read it and cross-check it and Google and all that goodness. And I have days and days and days to prepare.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a lot of hope right now for our country or our electoral system or democracy, but one of my sincere hopes is that elections as we know them under like severe overhaul, like the electoral college has to go.
Well, I think before we get into that, I think Jody, you bring up a good point, and Andrew as well, because I know that's also another loaded topic. But I think the reason people are so apathetic is, to everyone's point, disenfranchisement. Like people are just being barred, seemingly like for no reason, but we all fucking know why. From voting, and it's like, I remember during the primaries, there were so many students like at colleges all across the country who couldn't vote because the lines were so fucking long and the polls closed at 7 p.m. And those times are like strategically set so that only certain people can go vote. And it's like, why do we do that? So some things to think about for everyone watching right now. Just keep an eye on everything that's going on.
That brings up a really excellent point, Eric, around in Oregon, for example. I take for granted that I don't have to worry about 90% of the shenanigans that go on with voter suppression. Also, as a white person, I don't have to worry about 99.8% of the shenanigans that go on with voter suppression. But trying to educate people outside of my bubble, meaning family and friends who live elsewhere, around what the voting restrictions are where they live. Like, do you have to have a photo ID? Did you know that if you're in line, they can't kick you out of line? The polls will stay open until you are done. And just really trying to pass that knowledge on to folks who just haven't heard, for whom this isn't like a really common conversation.
Voting to me is I really struggle with this topic because I've voted twice already, and my votes just specifically went to a Black man. And I think probably 90% of the Black community voted for Obama and knew nothing else about politics. And now we're in a situation where we can't really vote for a savior. It not even a savior, but vote for someone we see represent us. Mm-hmm. I'm voting for people who I actually don't give two shits about. And I'm struggling with that idea.
Yeah.
Only because it's now we have these two people who I still don't fuck with. They're still making the outreach impossible. I have a friend in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, who waited in line for 7.5 hours to vote, and he still didn't get a chance to vote. He went into the city and was able to do it there. And for me, it was okay, you know what I mean? I see what's going on here. And going back to the options that we have, it made me realize they really don't matter to me. And voting is the minimum, the bare minimum of what I can do for my community. So I like that we are putting pressure on voting, but I think we need to put more energy into what we're doing in a community sense or in a city sense, because those people up there aren't going to do shit for me. Nothing that they have talked about, I really give two shits about. It's not going to improve the way I'm living, the way I'm trying to succeed. Yeah. It's more so I'm in community chats now. They're okay, what are these propositions that I need to vote for? How is it going to help build out these jobs, these entrepreneurs and stuff that will build the surrounding folks that I want to see thrive. that's kind of where I've been putting my energy to. Just because, again, it's like, even after you vote, even after whoever ends up wherever, we still have to figure out what I'm doing, like professionally, how I'm thriving in my household. Like when I go back to saying voting is like the bare minimum, it's like, okay, what else are you going to do for your community to help build up the idea that you want to see? Because they're not going to do it for you. You can put whoever in the office and they have the ideas that you want to spark, but that doesn't mean that's what they're going to focus on. So pushing voting to me is like, I get it. I understand it. I get that, like, we fought to get here, but like, that's not really my priority, because history, even with having a Black president, has shown me that, like, we're still not getting the things that we want done.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
What next? Like, can we talk about the next steps after we do this, you know?
I think that goes back to exactly what Jody was saying about our local elections. Like, there's a huge push on, like, you know, president every 4 years, federally, like that type of push for voting. I watch way too many documentaries and stuff, clearly, but, you know, watching the Patriot Act, which Netflix, screw you for canceling that.
They did?
Yeah, they canceled it.
Wow.
I know, trash.
Oh, okay.
There was a really good episode on about why we need to save local newspapers, because local newspapers are going to be what push what's going out in local elections. And without local newspapers, you're not going to hear about what is going on in your local election. And that's how, I forget where the city was, but that's how two elected officials at a local level ended up making like $700,000 a year, because they kept boosting their own salaries and people didn't know what they were voting for. So they just voted on it. It was found out years later. But I mean, like, these people one had a salary of like 500,000, one had a salary of $700,000. And it was all legal because it was voted in. So it's like, if we don't look at what's going on at a local level, it's never, ever going to impact what's going on at a federal and, like, you know, what's going on with people who are actually running our country.
So how do we change that narrative? Like, that's what's important to me, because
100%.
again, like, going into the polls and being like, okay, the only thing that matters is voting for a president. The only thing that mattered to me was voting for Obama. I didn't know who the fuck else I was voting for. I was circling bubbles. I was like, oh, this sounds like a Black name. This sounds like a liberal, like, you know what I mean? Like, proposition. I'm just like, how do I make the change that I want to see? And where does that come from? How do we encourage other people to want to figure?
I think there's a commercial out now, like, get your booty to the polls. And it really, rather than leaning any partisan way, the focal point is specific issues, right? Like, do you want to end cash bail? Do you want to, and really kind of highlighting to people, like, did you know that the district attorney is on the ballot, and that in calling out, like, this person has this track record, this person has that track record, and really digging into the local politics that signal a lot. Like here where I am, our mayor is on the ballot this time around. He's had a rough go of it. He has not shown well throughout all of the protests here. He's also the police commissioner, and it's a huge election here for the mayor seat, and it goes directly to the potential for any sort of police reform in this city. And so I think the idea of, Jojo, to your question, is doing the work, right? Like, educating yourself, like Andrew was talking about, and then you finding every avenue to amplify what you've learned and what you're passionate about. And even going to the point of, like, it's okay if you don't agree with me. Do these issues matter to you? If these issues matter to you, look at choice A, B, and C, but go vote. Because those are the things that affect your day to day. And in theory, those are the things that signal up to state representatives about the things they're supposed to, like, in theory, care about and represent.
I mean, yeah, and like it's true, right? Like it's obviously like those things aren't mutually exclusive. Like all of these things are opportunities. I think, Judge, you bring up a really good point that it's like, what else? There's a lot more you can be doing that maybe is more effective in your day-to-day that you can absolutely be doing. And I do think like what's great is like, what do we do after this election? Because maybe this right now is a huge opportunity for us to signal something about like, hey, what's going on? I'm not cool with. It's catching my attention. And here's a way that we collectively can signal that, hey, this is, or I am cool with, whatever your perspective is, whatever. Signal like, look, this is my voice being heard as a part of the collective. But you're right, like on the back end of it is like, it's not the only opportunity that we have to do that. You know what I mean? Like many of us have been a part of a lot of these opportunities to stand in the streets and march over the last 3-5 months over other things. And that has proven to be an incredible opportunity. And I just think that voting is one of those opportunities and an important one. In addition to everything else, like being a part of your local community and being involved in that community. Ultimately, you just have to show people that stuff does matter, and to not lose faith and to not be apathetic about any of those opportunities, because at the end of the day, it is all we have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is being out there supporting the businesses that you want to support is an opportunity. Being out there casting your vote is an opportunity. Marching in the streets is an opportunity. And you want people to feel like they're making a difference or making a change or expressing themselves or whatever the hell it takes to do something versus do nothing. Because apathy is the problem. The problem is like, I don't want to partake in any of these things because they don't matter.
Well, to that point, Andrew, I think this brings up a good like rhetorical question, which I think we all know the answer to. But is voting by itself truly the will of the people? Because and I see the reactions, but there are those reforms that we talk about. Like in Jody, we can talk about the Electoral College, but there's also ranked choice voting and things like that. So what are some like tangible ways we could fucking fix this broken system?
You mean other than burning it down?
I mean, that'd be ideal, right?
For me, for that question particularly, like just thinking about like when my experience in San Diego was when I first came here, I was like, this is super conservative. Like I don't see anybody thriving when it comes to like people of color, like I don't see it. Like I couldn't see myself into like at least the like kind of niche or the establishment that I was living in. So I digged in a little bit further. I did a little bit more of an outreach and found actually like here more like Black entrepreneurs here than I have in like maybe like, I don't know, some other places that I've been to. And I was like, wow, like no one is really paying attention to these people. And they're here in San Diego against odds. They're still kind of thriving. And for me, it's like, I need to put more investment and attention into that. And I think that is, to me, where I see our growth at. Even in San Diego, where it's conservative and we don't really feel like people of color here are acknowledged. There's like less, Black-owned restaurants than, a lot of the like cities or places in the US. I'm like, there's still people out here doing it. How can I be a part of that? How can I like recognize that? And in the United States, or as long as I've been here, I feel like people will celebrate more businesses that are being like capitalized versus individual growth. And I feel like that's where we need to start paying more attention to, is like the entrepreneurs who might not have an establishment yet, who might not have something off the ground, but how can we invest in those? This like small businesses is a thing. They need our attention, especially right now during COVID. You know what I mean? Like I feel like those things starting from the ground up and like pushing the initiative of just to kind of like help our city grow to be more diverse is more where I'm focused on. And I'm doing that through like learning in these like small community groups what these propositions mean. Again, like when I voted before, I never really took the chance to dive in deep of what's going on. Now I have like sip and drink parties where they like tell me what these properties, like I'll join a tequila anything. You can talk about whatever you want, but if you want to like encourage me to drink tequila while you tell me like what these propositions mean, that's great. Like I feel like
Wait, hold on. Where
that
can we find
level.
those? Where are those parties, JoJo?
SD Melanin. Like honestly, that's where I'm learning what a lot of these propositions mean. Because again, like if I was to vote, I was going to vote for whatever. But because it's in my faith, it's something that I know that's a part of the community. I'm more inclined to learn about it through conversation. You know what I mean? Through some kind of gallery or some kind of function, versus it being shoved down my throat and be like, vote for this, vote yes, vote no, and I'm like, vote for what? You know, like I feel like it needs more community building and conversations around these things for the people who might not be so engaged or might not really care about politics.
Well, that kind of touches back to Eric saying, you know, what can we do to get more people of our, not mine, your generation to the polls? And that's an interesting idea, JoJo. They like trying to, like, how do you meet? It really boils down to meeting people where they are, right? Like, getting a like thick ass pamphlet and spending the day reading is lame. I would much rather do a series of events and have some people be able to break down these issues in plain spoken English without a bias, right? Like have two lawyers or whomever who can also speak human, like break things down and just lay some stuff out, even like the inherent conflicts within any one particular like bill or whatever. But that feels like when you take that out to, well, what can I be doing after the election, even like maybe we start up some initiatives to get more of those events happening, or to catalyze more people to get those events going, if that's your jam.
It doesn't have to be like I kind of say what I've said in my own personal efforts to be more community building, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like it can just be just an understanding, like a basic understanding of what you are being involved in. You know what I mean? Like I can't even tell you who our mayor is. I can't tell you what he stands for. I can't tell you anything about what goes on in San Diego. I just hear, and it sucks. Like now that I'm becoming older and I'm becoming more aware, it does suck because you only grew up thinking that the president mattered, and it doesn't. They don't matter. Not for real, because if you literally get the right people in office, they can put more pressure on their neck to get the shit that you want done. You know.
It's interesting when you said that. Obviously I don't hide anything on my face. I grew up thinking that everything local mattered because my mom was all like out there with a picket sign like "Save our schools" and like,
I love that.
She's been protesting since the way back. I shared a picture with some of you all, but my mom's been going out, 78 years old, sitting in front of our local post office in our tiny hometown with her little yard signs about like voting, and
that's adorable.
That's cool. But see, like I think that's I'll just voice like something I get frustrated with is like you're right. We do have to put stuff out there to meet people where they are, but I also feel like us socially and culturally, I'm like, we have to like take a little bit more accountability and like going out and doing, you know what shit there is out there for us? Like how many resources are out there for us to do it? There's YouTube discussions, there's podcasts, there's nothing but it. All you have to show is like a modicum of like, let me go look for it. A Google search will give you fucking everything you need to know. And so like what I think about is like the biggest problem is pride in doing that. Like, I think it's like, how do you make it socially contagious that like, I'm proud that I did that, and I will say it out loud, and I will talk about it around my friends, and it is an important thing to me. And I'm not saying like, let me just tell you what you should do. I'm saying, yeah, it's important to me that I went and did that. It's important to me, like, just like you just did, JoJo, like you're proud that you're involved in the community. Right? Like you are setting an example for the people that you matter to. And that's the way you change minds. It's not, like we don't like, there's so goddamn how many resources there might be. And I'm all for giving people more new, cool, and interesting ways if it'll work, cool. But at the end of the day, it's like I kind of want people to lead by being the example in the way that JoJo is, and saying, also don't forget how important it is to be active in your community. I'm proud that I am. I'm interested in this. This is what I did. It worked for me. And I spread that word so that even if you change two minds about what they can do and what they should maybe do, that they stop and reflect and go like, damn, why am I not interested in that? Like, why don't I like educate myself? Why am I not involved in the community? Because that's where it matters. Like, people need to like stop for a second and look at themselves and go like, why am I not like at the end of the day doing that? Because it doesn't take that much. And I'll probably feel maybe as happy as JoJo does, or maybe as engaged as JoJo does, even though she's not happy with the way things are, she probably is a little bit more fulfilled that she's involved in something that matters to her.
I think that's ridiculously well said. And I think with Gen Z, like I hear a lot of like, my mom and my grandma keep talking about Gen Z and how proud they are of Gen Z. I was like, oh, so millennials don't mean anything, that's fine. But they're just like, it took them nothing to stand up and start saying like, things are wrong, this is bad. Like they weren't taught that, or, you know, maybe they did have, you know, Jody's mom, maybe they didn't have Jody's mom, like, you know, but it literally just took them being like, this is wrong, these people are bad, they're doing bad things. They took a platform, TikTok, totally screwed over an entire rally, which was absolutely amazing. So
Wait,
yeah, people got on TikTok, registered for tickets to Trump's rally in Tulsa, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
he had his huge turnout, and they didn't. And that was like literally Gen Z, and I think a K-pop like band too. Yes, like fucking up his rally. And I'm like, if these young people, and I'm not that old, but I'm like, if these young people can do this just because they know something is bad, if we fostered that type of energy and then gave them the resources to also arm themselves with even more knowledge versus like, this is just bad, like
Totally.
I really do believe that the world is going to change if we did exactly what like JoJo and Jody are saying and really took the time to go on these platforms and give them resources. I do believe that the world is going to change. Like it wasn't going to change with our parents' generation. It's slowly starting to change with ours. Like they, I think, can do it because they just understand the basic principle, right and wrong.
And, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jody.
I don't know enough to say one way. What I suspect, Lindsay, is that it's not just that they have a deep-seated understanding of right and wrong. I think those kids are educating themselves. They are growing up on seeking out platforms and self-educating, right? Like Teen Vogue, for God's sakes, is one of the best, like the best reads out there right now, which I think is fantastic. Some of the best journalism that's happening. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just so much that like they need more. I would almost say like millennials and then whatever came between Gen X and millennials, like the whole like 30 to 50 set needs that, to Andrew's point, a little bit of like a shot in the arm of there's pride to be taken, not just in going to the polls and like telling yourself that you're a good American, but in actually like doing some work and getting involved and putting a little bit more of yourself out there in there. I think putting a little more on the line rather than, you know, casually skimming through a ballot and then saying like, yeah, I did it.
I did it.
Well,
or I asked my dad what I should vote for. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, like, I don't know if the paradigm is changing. I mean, clearly it isn't, but I do think the conversation is changing in the sense that, like, politics is becoming less taboo and, like, there's less of a stigma. I mean, obviously, we're talking about this right now at our workplace, and this probably would have never happened, 5 years ago. So I think it's interesting to me that while shit is still fucked up, at least we can openly talk about it, and have that pride that you guys are alluding to.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No. Okay. Well, I was also about to say, like, I think because of the way that my mind is set, and I just want to say, like, no matter what happens, even if things don't go into your favor, is that you arm yourself during this time. I can't stress it enough. Like, rejection is something that we are used to as a country. So don't be surprised if things do not go in your favor, that this is also just a battle. Like, it's a battle regardless of who wins, what gets, elected, what happens. Like, you cannot stop. And for me, that's like my mindset on this. Whether you vote, you don't vote, whether you choose whatever side you want to choose, at the end of the day, I think that, like, collectively we understand that, like, humans deserve rights, like opportunities. That if you have that logic, period, then you know that this is just, again, just the tip of the iceberg to the problems that no one will solve for you. You have to solve them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's been my.
I think that's awesome, Jojo, because I think it's the concept of not voting to get back to normal or to
Yeah.
or to perpetuate, like, no, it's about we have to, however things turn out, that, like, I see November as the beginning of a new heavy push.
Mm.
To get some significant and new paradigms into place, right? Like,
yeah, it's the first step, right? It's the first step towards doing the right thing. And yeah, nothing on the ballot's perfect. God, no, fuck no, far from it, right? Like, and you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's like, what's a step in the right direction? Or at least that's how I look at it. But I do think, like something you were saying to earlier, Lindsay, that it's funny to me because, like, I went through like a weird time. Like, you were talking about like the power of social media and like just some of the things that seems like ceremony and gesture and things that, like, I even wrote off like so much of stuff that goes on social media that is like, okay, it's saying something, but it's not doing anything. And I've started to just really like challenge myself on that, is like, okay, even if you do just go out and voice your opinion and say something in social, but you're not out there doing anything, at the end of the day, like, that's powerful, because all it is, it's like a bumper sticker on your car. You're making somebody who wasn't going to look at that and be reminded every single time that, oh shit, that's right, there are people out there that feel like that. And so, like, when I look at the impact of like the things that happened in that rally, where it could have been the memory, when you look back at it, it's like, look how many people showed up in support of that, versus the memory that we have of it is like, look at what people did who were against it. Like, look at how creative and ingenuitive they were in order to make it look like a farce, make it look ridiculous, or make it look a different way. And it's like, it may seem like frivolous, stupid, silly social media stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm like, it kind of is effective. We're social animals. It infects our minds as to like the public perception of what these ideas are. Even you see what's happening with like Proud Boys right now. And I know it's even controversial, but it's like their hashtag being taken over in social media by people who want to, and not in a way that like people like criticize it because maybe it's not a good light to use that as like some negative to shine a light on this thing, because Proud Boys, being like proud homosexuals, being a takeover of a hashtag, and that gets criticized. But at the same time, I think what they're trying to do is show that like more people don't support what this is actually about. And we're going to show you by taking over the conversation that you're having. And I think that that's like, at the end of the day, it's a powerful gesture, because that is what people who observe it will remember. That is what people who observe it will see. They're not going to see all the arguments of a group of people that are racist, or, so I don't know. It's just, I challenged myself before, because like I used to be a little, maybe it was like negative minded about like, okay, these are just gestures and they're not doing anything. And it's like typical social media. And now I'm like, but we're, at the end of the day, we're social beings, and like that's how we get our minds changed, by being exposed to like, wow, there's a lot of people out there who are supporting maybe a different perspective on this, and you can affect change like even if it's in the slightest way.
I think that, yeah, I agree with that 100%, Andrew. And I think that's like, yeah, there's a spectrum of impact, right? Effort and impact. They don't always go one for one. However, I would say like posting something on social media is certainly low effort and potentially low impact, but you don't know. You never know until it's like, I think there's a lot, it's the modern day equivalent of a yard sign, right?
Mhm.
And it really means a lot to me anyway, when I'm driving someplace and I see a bunch of yard signs for a politician that I find repugnant. It signals to me that I am in like actually unfriendly territory. And
Yeah.
and this where I'm headed with this is it goes hand in hand with something that struck me hard relatively recently, right? Like the concept for white people in particular that like silence is violence, or like not saying something is saying something. And so for me not to put my own yard sign out, for me not to post on social media is for me to not be, it's like the absence of a voice in all of my social network to see like there are no a bunch of people I know, or at least like a person I know and love and hopefully respect represents this. So I think it can be impactful, and the degree to which you are intentional about it, right? Like maybe not citing your like questionable sources, and maybe not being incendiary, but like focusing on being educational or focusing on, I don't know. I think there definitely is impact there.
That's the huge point too, Jody. Like there is a plethora of stuff on the internet, but making sure what you are reading is factual and not just facts generated by one group of people that are immediate bias facts. Like you can very quickly read something and be like, this is true. Like Jojo, my favorite one was you and like the Pornhub. Like you read it, you were like, yep, like Black people on Pornhub, and Erwin and I were like, that's not true. And it's just like you can so easily read one article and be like sucked into it, this is fact, and then spread that. So it's like this time specifically, it has forced us to read an article and be like, I need to go fact check what I just read, and even go back and fact check the next article that you just read to make sure that you are getting accurate information, or the most accurate information. There's always going to be biases like wherever you go, but just making sure that you are doing your due diligence to just not start spewing stuff, because then you lose credibility with the people that you're trying to argue with. Like, if these people actually are educating themselves and they're like, nah, bro, like I read extensively on this topic, you just read one really random article on some really random site.
Well, I think it's like, it's not the point of like having an argument or being right. I think anything that you read brings to the table is worth discussion, and like creating the space to have that discussion. I think that's what's important. It's like, no matter how much you read, no matter how much you see on like, I don't know, social media or whatever, like creating the space to be like, okay, you're not right, but like, let me explain, is very important, because also what you're explaining is also like probably partially the truth. Like we're just in a time where things are just happening so fucking fast that someone can spew a whole paragraph of something and you only take 2 seconds or 2 parts of that and be like, okay, this is what they said. It just, the world that we live in is so crazy, so fast and so instant that conversations, for me, it literally needs to mean something to you. You can't repeat or quote after anyone unless you're actually there watching their mouth say it. And I think, again, like that's what's important during this election time, is that you actually listen to it come out of the individual's mouth versus taking media quotes or whatever from it. It's like, figure it out for yourself from the mouth that is coming from, because there's ways to find it. Like if you're going to do research, like figure out what that person actually said, what that person actually believes in, what that person stands for. Even if it like takes you a little bit longer to dive into, like we're all on the computer, we all have our phone in our hands, like dive a little bit deeper, even if you're against it, to figure out what their meat and potatoes is coming from. Because if that person gets elected or if that person is our person, like it'd be good to know what that person is standing for.
I couldn't agree more. And I think like what's interesting to me too is like in a world where eyeballs equal money in our society, where I just say everything is spin. And the best way that I work through that is I intentionally read things that maybe I don't want to agree with, or I don't agree with. I intentionally look at all of this spin and to try and triangulate, like, where does this actually sit somewhere in the middle, or is it maybe not in the middle? Sometimes it's on this side or whatever on that side. But like, to me, it's always like, I want to see different perspectives. Sometimes that makes me angry as fuck doing that. But it's important to me to be like, what is it that's going through, somebody who disagrees with me's mind, in order to, like, what are they reading? Like, how could I make an argument against where that's coming from, in order to just, try and get as round of a picture as I can to make a decision.
There's nothing I enjoy more than like logic wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Like
someone says something that I don't agree with, whatever. Like, and this is specifically on social media, but also in life. In doing, like, seeing something, and Jojo, to your point, like taking some time to go cross-check some references, to shore up some either opinions, or like I have a hazy recollection of, a proof point or an argument, going and actually reading back up on that, and then taking the time to like carefully craft a response, right? Not just like angry emoji and rage type, but like actually craft kind of like a logical response of either if then, or like, what I hear you saying is, and if that's true, then let us consider these things. And it takes time and it takes some patience, and so I do it sparingly, right? Like, I can't respond to all the ridiculous shit I see out there. I respond to ridiculous shit specifically when I think there will be enough eyeballs on it that who might also take some time and read something with care and think about it. Whether they agree with me or not is fine. I mean, it's not fine, but I want people to, like, my intention is, what if I put something else out there that gives people pause? And like, that to me is worthwhile.
I don't know, Jody. Sometimes rage typing, not at somebody, but if you read something and then you rage type it to yourself, feels real damn good.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me wrong. Rage typing is great. Yeah.
Cool. I think we should turn it over to any questions. Eric, do you have questions?
Yeah. Well, Linnea is going kind of wild in the chat comments. But we do have a couple serious questions from Linnea. So her first is, where is it? Oh. So how can we differentiate politics from basic rights, especially when we have women's physical rights on the line? And how do we protect these rights when we don't really vibe with the candidates and don't view those things as necessarily political? I cannot talk today.
To me, personally, for me, it goes back to just like, I don't put my faith into politics. Like, politics to me aren't the above all end all. And no matter who is in office at what level, I'm going to continue to do what I need to do to see myself rise, people I care about rise, my community rise, my kids rise. It's like, politics to me, it's just like that no, that I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to cross it anyway. And whether you choose to like encourage me or not, we're going to figure a way to like move past it. That's how I look at politics.
Bye, y'all. Thank you for having me. Have a good weekend.
Bye. I mean, like, sadly, I have to wrap up too here soon, but like sadly, things that we would think are rights and things that we would call morality have been politicized in the world that we live in. And I don't think that we can differentiate. Like, even though we should, I think sadly, like, morality sits on a spectrum and we don't all align on it. And therefore it becomes a political quarrel. And so, you know, I consider certain things human rights, and all we can do is make the case for why that is the truth that benefits more people at the end of the day.
Totally.
You know, I mean, like for me, because I'm like, I always say, like, I'm a relativist. Like, I think if you grow up in a certain part of the world, you're raised by a certain set of moral standards, like you will live by those. You know, we have people, especially in a country like ours, where you have freedom of religion, belief, like, have to understand that certain elements of morality live on a spectrum, and people are going to live by different standards. And the most important right we have is like the freedom to live by some of those standards and respect everybody else's right to live by their own standards. That's where I'm like, that's the rule, is like the recognition that we all live on a moral spectrum and the right to live on that moral spectrum to an extent, you know, so long as it doesn't infringe on one another.
That very word has been politicized, and infringement is on the table, right?
Yeah.
It is on the biggest tables with the Supreme Court soon. And I feel you on that, Andrew. Like yes. So that gets into Linnea, damn it. It's a bigger philosophical discussion. I need a bunch more red wine and like 8 more hours. But when morality is on a spectrum and we are all trying to live together in a united society, and we have given outrageous power to a remarkable minority, we're in the trouble we're in, right? And so it's to me, it's something that is not to be accepted. I mean, I don't know the answer necessarily. I do believe that what we're seeing in the modern climate, or the current climate rather, is we are identifying friends, family, whomever, colleagues, whose moral system or value system is in dramatic odds with our own at times, right? Like, hopefully that's not the norm, but I'm definitely have friends and colleagues who are talking about how they don't speak to family members anymore. Mm-hmm. And I definitely have people in my life where I'm like, I don't, to quote JoJo, I don't need to fuck with you anymore. And it's exactly that, because people are revealing where they sit on that moral spectrum. And it is, again, there are a very there is a segment of folks where I'm like, that is morally repugnant to me. And so I don't know how to respect you. Maybe that's the biggest thing. And I definitely know how to connect with you. And I'm certainly not going to try to change your mind. And I think that's where we've ended up in a really divisive situation because of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think to close things out, like, that's kind of where we're at right now. You know, the world is fucked up. Moral of the story. Go vote November 3rd. We have links on social media, in our Instagram.
Don't let me end on that. Come on.
I'll end it on that. Don't worry, I got you. So that said, yeah, we'll be continuing sharing out voting resources till election day. So everyone just tune into social, get involved, get active, and then we'll see you at the polls. And next week, hopefully. All right. Bye, everyone.
Weekend.